Ryan and Lawrence, I think you guys are going to
Hey.
float away today.
We got some cool backgrounds going, huh?
Yeah.
Feel like I should have one.
But people think that's fog, but it's actually CO2.
I love your
It's
background.
it's sublimating CO2.
You're
Oh,
so
there's Barb.
you're so cool, steampunk, Lawrence.
Huh?
You're cool, steampunk.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I learned everything I know from you, Barb. Especially in the steampunk era.
Good morning, everyone.
Did you get a new hairdo or something, Barb? You look kind of like something different happened. Your mic's off. Your mic's off, Barb. There you go.
It's a little bedhead this morning, Lawrence.
Oh, okay. I thought you were sticking the fork in the electric circuit again. Whoa.
Yeah, I think so.
That's good. And how's Miss Betty today?
I'm fine. I'm just fine. Thank you.
Good. Alphonse? He's out there somewhere.
There he comes. He's just unmuted.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well,
Good. And Mr. Nia, how are you?
Doing all right. Good to see you. You're very chipper.
Well, it's all happiness, It's all fun.
I'm not ready.
Come on.
Working on it.
Oh,
Everyone else, I don't think I know anyone else.
well, we'll get started here in a minute, I guess.
Well, cheers to all. It's coffee.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, if other people are coming, they'll have to, they're on their own schedule too. But the bus can leave now. Okay, so today, first, welcome everybody. Today we're going to have a conversation about books. Probably the South Dakota Book Fest actually starts today. And I'm hoping that some of the co-conspirators will show up. At least Ryan's here, and he's been working on it, and he can give us a little bit of information about what they're doing, what the purpose of it is. But our subject today is going to be about books and how books have the potential to help us to improve our society, how sometimes they have helped damage society. I mean, they have all that potential. They're all different kind of books. So this subject is going to be about books and their impact on our lives. But before we actually get into our subject, I would like Ryan, since he's the representative of a humanities council, and he's probably more intimate than he wants to be involved with making it happen. Tell us about what's going on with the book fest. When does it start, and what kind of things how can people get hooked up with it, and what can they get out of it?
Sure. Well, we're doing, it's an all new thing for us this year. We've never done an all virtual festival before, but the planning has gone well, and so today is the first official day, and there's a kickoff celebration at 6:30. And the easiest way to register, so you get a general admission pass that gets you into everything for free besides 3 paid workshops, which are writing workshops. So if you go to sdbookfestival.com and then click on the tickets tab, and I can put it in the chat here too, that will get you into everything but those 3 workshops. And then you'll receive a code in your email telling you how to log in and everything once you sign up. And we're really excited this year about the possibilities, you know, from so many people being able to watch it. We've gotten a lot of comments from people saying like, can't you just come to the book festival because I live in Maryland or something like that, you know, and they get to see not only like South Dakota authors, but a lot of very well-known national authors like Max Brooks, who wrote the book World War Z, which was obviously turned into a movie, and that book was the best-selling zombie thriller of all time. So he's going to be really good. And then I don't know if any of you have read The Orphan Master's Son by Adam Johnson. That's gotten a lot of attention. You got a Pulitzer Prize for that. That's another big one we're having. Robert Dugoni is a pretty famous thriller author. He's sold like 5 million books. And he's a pretty interesting guy too, because he focuses just on the story. You know, people kind of know him as a thriller mystery author, which is sort of separate from the literary genre, but he also wrote a really good nonfiction book it was called The Cyanide Canary. It was basically an expose about this guy who got trapped in this vat with some poisonous chemicals and the whole trial they went through and everything like that. So, and if any of you are interested in fiction writing, that's going to be a really good workshop. And that is tomorrow. And that's $20, which is a really good deal. I saw him in New York, and I paid a lot more than $20 to see that. So it's a fantastic deal. But other than that, there's just, you know, we have a lot of our South Dakota authors that we have had in the past, like Patrick Hicks, and we've got a lot of poetry stuff going on that Lawrence could probably talk about a little bit. Fiction, nonfiction, young readers, basically every kind of book that you would want to read, you can find out something or other about, you know, an author that you like or a specific book or anything like that. So is that a pretty good summary, Lawrence? Does anybody?
I would say, if you have more questions, you know, I would say go to the South Dakota Humanities Council website, click on the book festival, and you know, that website will kind of fill you in with the details. That the poetry, I don't know if you call it slam jam or thank you ma'am, but anyway, that'll be tomorrow night, and so that should be fun. Yours truly will be reading some of my provocative poetry. So yeah, show up, you know, show out, as they say, you know.
And Alphonse is one of the presenters, and we've got him on here. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
What
are you going to present on, Alphonse?
Well, what I did related to peace education last time, I'm going to go in depth with my co-presenter from South Africa. He's going to be able to join me in talking about it. And the council came up with a very provocative title for the session, which my colleague and I are pleased with. It's like the moment, addressing civil unrest through peace education.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, I think we'll get started next. Our next part of this program is I'd like to go around to the folks who are here and have them give some kind of introduction to themselves by saying, you know, who they are or who they want to be, and where they are or where they want to be, and then. The question today is, how do you define a book? Okay, and let's start with Thea. Yeah, there you go.
Can we make another question? How do you define a book?
How do you
Oh.
define a book? Yeah.
Well, I'm Thea Miller Ryan. I'm from the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Dakota. Just as a matter of fact, last night on public broadcasting, I watched a show about how they made books in the past and all the different ways that they did it. But one of the ways that I learned was the sheep skins that they would stretch out and throw the hot water at, and how you know, a twofold, that's how the term book spine came up, is because that was actually the spine of the animal and how long it took to make those books. It was fascinating. So I'm gonna look at it from more of a scientific and logical path today to define books.
Mhm. So that's okay. Okay. I mean, there's lots more to say, and we will explore it a bit more, because I think whenever you're talking about a subject, it's useful to have an agreement of terms. You know, to have an idea. Well, what, you know, when I say book, are you thinking of the same thing? You're thinking more. You're thinking less. You're thinking different. Because, and since the topic is books, it just seems reasonable that we say, okay, well, what do you think a book is? It doesn't have to be, quote, the right answer. It just should be what you think it is. Okay.
I think
And
it's
then-
a million
oh,
other
sorry, go
things.
ahead.
I think it's a million other things too, but that's just what came to the top of my mind in a moment of panic.
Okay. We're going to explore it some more. Good.
Okay.
Good. Danae.
So happy to go second. Thank you. My name is Danae Verba. I grew up in Sioux Falls, returned to Sioux Falls, and at the moment I work for Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota as a sexuality educator. But my background is in biology, so I am also a very literal, concrete thinker. And Thea took my idea, so you gotta be unique here. I have a Kindle, and so that ebook, newfangled thing, did not spring immediately to mind when you said the word book, but in the duress of time here, so a book could, I guess, be any means of reading or hearing the collected thoughts and words of another person, whether hard copy printed on animal skin or paper or whatever, or a bunch of electrons that change the dark patterns on a little tablet screen I have. I'm all done.
Okay, good. Miss Betty, how are you doing this morning, my dear?
I'm doing wonderfully. The sun is shining, and that makes it nice for me. A book, Carolyn Keene's Nancy Drew Mysteries. When I was a girl, I spent a lot of time with my nose in those books. But kind of picking up what Danae said, the evolution of the book just in my lifetime. I mean, I don't know a lot of book history, as Thea's talking about the actual beginning of putting them together, but a repository of all kinds of information. But the evolution, yesterday I got late notice that there was a one book conversation going on last night at Presentation College. I live in Aberdeen, and it happens to be one of my new most interesting authors' books, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And so I thought, oh my, I want to hear, but I hadn't read the book yet. And then I went to my Audible account and ordered it. It was only supposed to be about a 3.5 hour listen. So I ordered the Audible, and it popped up and said, you already have this in your library. So I did spend, I was doing other things, but that's one of the nice things about an Audible book, that you can often get a lot of good from it while you're doing other things. So yeah, I'm a book lover, now reading a lot more during this time of self-imposed isolation. And that's to my benefit, and I hope that it helps me to be a more useful person in the world whilst I'm still here. And I'm planning to be here for a long time yet.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Betty. Barb? Mike, your mic's not on.
Hi, Lawrence and all. I'm Barbara Johnson, and I'm a humanities scholar. And I'm presently in Sioux Falls at the Touchmark All Saints community, which is a very interesting place. I'm in the independent living part of the community, but we also have people in assisted living and in memory care. And one of the things I've noticed is that during this period of really enforced isolation in communities such as this, that the real lifeline to the world are books. And the people here, many of whom don't have access to a lot of books, are really learning about the technology and how that really opens up their world, even in isolation. We're all really excited about the Festival of the Book because the administrators at our community are arranging a video link in one of our community rooms with enforced social distancing. But we're really excited because the people here will get to participate in a public event, something that they really haven't had time to do. One of the other things I've noticed is as the technology has evolved, the discussions have really been, and this is an interesting question, what is a book? Is it something paper that you hold in your hands? Is it an ebook? Is it an audible, a book recording? And we've had the population, I've been told that the average age of the population here at All Saints is 80. So I'm a baby in this community. But a lot of the people are really having an interesting time getting used to the march of technology. But in many respects, it's a positive experience because it just opens up the world so much more. So I guess that's all I have to say about what is a book. It's changing.
That's a very important addition to our conversation. Kylie. Hello.
Okay, I apologize. I missed the question. So could you repeat the question?
What is a book to you? You know, how would you define a book?
That is a really good question. When I think of a book, I think of a thicker bound pieces of paper. But with Barbara talking and mentioning that really the way that we consume knowledge or read has changed, I think that there will be room for a book to be considered like any type of literature that I don't know, that's available in a lot of different medias, because I even think of the children's books that are available, and every school in the district that my children are in, every school has multiple accounts to online resources for books or for reading, and they've actually gone away from a lot of the paper copies because if you have internet, you can access everything that way. And as another note, my kids hardly bring home papers from school anymore because everything's done through a computer or another type of device. So it is really interesting to think that books really may not be that much of a thing in the future, or the physical book that we think of. And like textbooks don't hardly exist in the district my children are in, which is very different, because we even had the discussion with some science homework. We said, don't you just have a textbook? You know, where is this info at? And we definitely had a different, very different than when I was a kid. So I think, yeah, I agree with Barbara that books are evolving, and I think it's honestly gonna turn into pretty much an electronic file.
Okay, cool. Melinda.
Good morning. It's a good question. Yes.
Melinda, where are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Melinda, and I am the grants coordinator for the South Dakota Humanities Council here in Brookings. I've lived in a lot of different places, moved 18 times in 40 years. And so I've lived in a lot of different places. I'm going to approach your question. My background is in education. And I have a special interest in children's books because of that. But my answer to your question is really going to come from more of an interactive perspective, because I see a book as something that I interact with, and I feel like it's something that engages me, and it takes me somewhere else besides where I am. My favorite book is the Poisonwood Bible, and I read that book a long time ago. I read it actually in the year 2000. I don't know if people know the book, but it's by Barbara Kingsolver, and it's about a Baptist missionary who takes his family somewhat reluctantly, on to an international, I think they go into, I'm trying to remember if it's in Africa. I'm sorry, I don't remember, it's been 20 years, but I was in Haiti at the time that I read that book. And so I was very connected to it. I was very connected to the characters. And while I say that books take me somewhere else, that took me right to where I was. I felt like it dropped me right into that place. So how I interact with the book is really important, and how I feel part of the family of the characters, and how I think about them even when I'm not reading the book. You might sort of wake up in the morning and think, oh, I've got to get back to that. I want to know what happens next. And I'm sure other people feel that sort of same tug if they really, really connect with the book. So it kind of goes back to teaching children how to connect to books, how to have those personal with books, how to have their world connections to books, how they connect one book to another. But yeah, that's how I would define a book.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Alphonse.
I certainly concur with a lot of that which has already been said, but I've been trying to think about my experience with all kinds of books. So I've worked on edited books. I've actually am writing another book in the process of, I've hand grips handled, which we still would call a book. I've held poetry books to me, and I've been trying to think about what makes them all the thing that we call a book. Some are short in terms of number of pages. Some are incredibly long, like textbooks. So what is it? It has a beginning, a middle, and an end that takes us through one complete understanding of a story, a subject matter. I think, especially like with the children's books, they're not big at all. They're not many pages, but at the same time, it's a complete work that has a beginning, middle, and end. It's just the right length for that particular reader. So that is a complete work that, like I said, that starts someplace, it goes through a few changes, and then it ends, and it satisfies us through the journey.
Okay, excellent. Ryan, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, kind of going off of what Barbara said, I interviewed Robert Dugoni for a feature story, and I think that books have really become a lifeline for some people. Well, he told me that specifically, that he's gotten more emails during this time of, just these heartwarming emails from people who say, like, I'm stuck in my house, I have nothing to do, and you know, I feel an intimate connection with you and these places that you talk about. And some of these people are terminally ill and they're never even gonna, you know, get a chance to leave their house again. So, yeah, it's almost a form of like mental telepathy, that special intimate message between the reader and the writer.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think there's some very interesting ideas that have been put forth. If I were to try to describe a book, I would say that it is a collection of ideas. Often we focus on the form of the book, but even before the electronic era, there are many different forms of books. Unfortunately, we have, let's say, limited experience. But if I could just run through, skim off the top, some of the original books were on stone, because they didn't have, paper was a big deal until the Chinese figured out a way to mass produce paper. It was a very precious thing and very unusual, and quite frankly, very unstable. The kinds of materials that they have. They have been grasses that have been beat. There have been bark that have been pounded. There have been skins, not only the skins in terms of parchment, but other skins as well, where people have introduced dyes, etc., into skins to make things. They have been carvings on wood. They have been clay tablets, that some of the earliest books that we still have, let's say, reasonable copies of, are clay tablets. They have been inscribed on metal. They have been bamboo. Bamboo was a very big thing for some of the early Chinese books. Before they had paper, they were doing bamboo. Some of the early religious texts were written on bones. People inscribed, and they were collected and held together as books. Okay, as we think of a bound book now, they were a collection. The bamboo ones, they were even strung together using various kinds of cord. Little holes were placed in them, and they were, kind of like a scroll. And that's a whole other thing. Books were on scrolls. So they were always in many different forms. And then I think they took off. The Chinese were doing books long before Gutenberg, and they got the idea of the movable type. So it was new to Western culture or Europe, but it was not new to the Chinese. But it was also very limited in terms of like who got those books. Books were a thing for people of leisure time and discretionary income. Those are the only people who had time to learn to read, because it takes time, especially with the Chinese system. You had to memorize about 5,000 characters just to sort of like get a basic idea of what was going on. So that takes a little bit of time. And if you're scuffling around for food, you probably don't have that. And it wasn't really until the military in China needed to communicate that they changed the way that they were writing to this movable type so that they could print stuff, that they can print documents for the Chinese military. They were involved in like taking the script that was handwritten by the priests, monks, shaman, etc., those people, and then sort of like putting them into new form that could be made into movable type and ideograms, and they were ideograms anyway, and then creating the structure for that. Books in China came out of that. Well, then you speed up to Gutenberg in the West, and of course, I'm going to think that many of you know the story of Gutenberg, coming up with this press. Even before that, people were trying other ideas. It's just that he kind of like got ahead of the game. But it was the book from that from Gutenberg's time, it really changed culture more than probably any other single thing, because it provided for the dissemination of information. And also because now books could be printed more cheaply and quicker, uh, it meant that now it made sense for everyone to read. Um, you probably heard about the 10 Commandments. All right, somebody's probably told you about the 10 Commandments. Well, one of my questions about the 10 Commandments was, why did they bother putting them on stone? Because almost no one could read, right? No, so putting it on there was completely, why? Even the Egyptian hieroglyphs, most of the people could not read those, and even the ones who could read them, according to my sources, there were 3 different meanings of the hieroglyphics, depending on what level and where you were in society. You could read the same thing and get 3 different meanings. Okay, and most people couldn't read at all. So until the Gutenberg, and until that wasn't an idea that everybody should be reading. And then when you make it phonetic, now you can teach people faster than the Chinese were doing. And still today, the Chinese spend, they say, about somewhere between a fourth and a third of all their education, K-12 education, just teaching people how to read and write. That's why they're going to Pinyin, which is another system now, because it's taking them too long and there's too much knowledge now. Before, it wasn't as much knowledge, but now just to be functional, you have to be the equivalent of a PhD in old times, just to graduate from high school. It's amazing. People say, oh, these kids aren't learning anything. They're learning a lot more than most of us learned, and a heck of a lot more than our parents and grandparents learned, just to get out of high school, So that said, now we speed up to this period of time where we have electronic media. And not only through the Kindles and things like that, electronic books, but also audio books. Now, not only are there audio books, but the electronic books include videos and pictures. And that means that the whole idea, the whole experience now can go to something more like the human brain works on. That is to say, reading is an unnatural act. That's one of my mottos, because the brain is not designed to read. This is a new experience for humans, and we often forget that. The whole idea of tracking, with the eyes tracking and converting symbols into words, and then those words into ideas and images, that requires a lot of processing. And most people have a hard time with that, even though we like to think, well, everybody can read. Well, everybody can't, So the addition of pictures with books helps to support the imagery that we're trying to create with the words on paper. And that means that, like, if you get like a book that's made in the Apple arena, you can have a thing where you click on it and a movie will play to show you how to do something, for example, okay? Or an interview will play. So instead of just having John said, you click on this thing and you hear John in John's voice. That means a lot more than reading what John said, because when you read what John says, you have to interject your own pausing, your own interpretation of, like the emphasis on which word, like if I say, John went to the store, that's different than John went to the store, which is different than John went to the store, right? So if you don't have a way to know which one of those accents was the person saying, you don't really have a way to have a clear idea of what the writer or the originator of that text meant. So with these new augmentations, the book is actually expanding on what it could be. There's a lot more of that dissertation, which I won't go into now, but I will say this, that with all of that, still today, my sources tell me that the printed book is still king. More people are buying printed books than any of those other ones. And at one time, they thought, well, these electronic books are gaining, and if we project out, what we're going to see is they're going to overtake and maybe even surpass the printed book. That has not happened. And in fact, that whole electronic book thing has flattened, according to my sources. Now, there are some reasons for that, and that's important to the physical book as well. The reason is that we actually read slower when we read from tablets. It's just the way the eye sees things and how the brain processes stuff. All things equal, we read slower from a tablet than we do on a page. The other thing is the batteries on books don't run down, they just keep going like the ever-ready battery. Now, the books have, the other thing is the operating system of a book doesn't become obsolete. It's going to be there. And so if we write something in a book, we can reasonably expect on archival paper that book will have a shelf life of about 200 years. That's a reasonable expectation on archival paper. I will underestimate that. I will underscore that. If you take care of it and put it in the right conditions, it can last hundreds more years. Okay, and we have evidence of that before people actually had what we call archival paper. Some of that paper is lasting a pretty long time, and we have better paper now. We have better paper technology, so even more stuff could get done. So that's to say that still the printed book is, at least to my mind, the gold standard still of books. Okay, so that's the brief Diggs expose of what's happening with books. I would like to look at now, what kind of books do you enjoy and why? So let's, Eduardo just showed up, so why don't we start with him. Hello, everyone. I like your hat, man.
Thank you. It's the season.
Yeah, it's hat season.
Wow, I really love business books, and in particular, just to jump off your thing about the printed books, I'm digesting an incredible number of audiobooks these days because I can take them in when I'm on the move doing something else, and you can speed up the audio too. So you can do double time or even triple time if you're inclined. But I really enjoy business books because they're really all about creating value for people and about how entrepreneurs, they tell lots of entrepreneurial stories about how people were committed to creating more value for people and the adversities that they overcame to do that. And I find that very inspiring because I feel like those stories of their overcoming adversity are really useful to me in traversing my own ups and downs.
Excellent. Betty.
I was just going to try to remember how to spell entrepreneurial. I'm making notes here. The kinds of books that I'm most enjoying now have to do with history of the United States, written by contemporary historians, because they are teaching me so much that I feel I desperately need to understand right now. I also love reading books on Native American history, particularly the Dakota people from whom I am descended. And many of those books are also written now contemporaneously by Native scholars and historians, and they're now also writing down. I noticed Barbara was chatting about oral history, which of course is the only history years ago. And there was a point when Ernie Lapointe, who lives in Rapid City area, was told by his aunties that now it was the time for him to write the oral history, and that helped him to be declared by the Smithsonian Institute as the rightful last heir of Chief Sitting Bull. And so they bestowed upon him and his family some of the relics that had been held by the Smithsonian since Sitting Bull was murdered. And so it's all important, but those are the kinds of things I've been reading recently.
Okay. Thea?
You always take me by surprise. Well, let's see. I kind of read a whole bunch of books at once. So I've been reading How to Be Anti-Racist. I've been reading mysteries. I love Craig Johnson. Let's see. I listen to a lot of podcasts. So does that count as reading? Because that's like my life right now, or pretty much podcasts. Political things, but history is fascinating to me right now, because right now I'm trying to catch up on, we talked about it last week, but all the history that I'm kind of mad that I missed. And so I'm trying to catch up on that kind of stuff right now.
Okay, good. Miss Danae?
They read my mind again. I've been doing a lot of listening to a lot of podcasts. Girl Trek, Michelle Obama, kind of random comedy, things on the lighter side. I'll do a couple adulting style podcasts, and then I just have to stop and I need some escapism. Silliness, must have silliness, otherwise I might go insane. My favorite kind of book to read. I like hard copy books. I prefer them. I like the smell. I like the texture. I get so happy in an old bookstore. It's ridiculous. My favorite is old sci-fi. Right now I'm reading Octavia Butler, so kind of Afrofuturism. But before I was introduced to her, Douglas Adams, Isaac Asimov, Heinlein, Vera Burroughs, you know, Mary Shelley even, which is not really technically science fiction, it's more horror, but there's sciencey things in it. I like looking back at how people thought things would be in the future. You know, ray guns and aliens and spaceships and floating cities, and we're not there yet. You know who nailed it? Dystopian futurism. They're like just right. So Octavia Butler is basically giving me the recipe book for where we are now. That's a whole new experience.
I find it interesting that two people have referenced podcasts, and I would say podcasts are the new series novels or books, you know, because people, and actually many people, including yours truly, have put out a book completely as a podcast. That is the finished product. You know, it's like it just put it out, and that's the only place that book, I plan for that book to ever exist, is in that form. Because it seems like that media has its own kind of ambiance, you know, and its own raison d'etre. So it's in its own little world, but it also often comes off of printed books, where the print, it picks up where it's almost like sometimes like an addenda to a printed book. so it becomes, you know, sort of an appendage to that printed world too. Barbara, what are you reading, or what are you enjoying these days? Your mic, Barb. Mike. Barb. Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Now start over.
Okay. I've been taking this opportunity of isolation to read lots of different kinds of books that maybe I've never read before. I'm currently reading The Children of Ash and Elm, which is the history of the Vikings, which is sounds like it could be very academic, but it's really a wonderful book. And I sort of alternate between reading it and listening to it on Audible. And sometimes you can do what they call immersion reading, which is you can read and listen at the same time. So I've really enjoyed learning about cultures of a different kind and how they saw the world and dealt with the world's problems. I've also read something, the online book clubs have been a lifesaver for me. And the Folger Library in Washington, the Shakespeare Library, has a wonderful book club that basically doesn't read Shakespeare, it reads things that are sort of related to Shakespeare. And this last month, the book was I, Tituba, which was about the Black witch in Salem, Massachusetts during the witchcraft trials. And not much is known on her, but a author sort of fictionalized her life, which was really a really good read. As I said, I'm also reading The Children of Ash and Elm, and one of my other book clubs, the Northwestern University Book Club, we read several of the racism books, but now we're reading The Gentleman from Moscow, which was a really interesting book. You know, I have several books going at the same time. And like I said, my eyes have been kind of funny. So having the Audible books has been really a lifesaver. That's what I've been reading.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought that up about, you know, the immersion experience, because that is one, I think that it's one of the let's say maybe more recently recognized and usefulness of other forms of information dissemination. You know, to be able to augment the printed word, so that it's not either or but both and. I think that's an important contribution to this new technology, Kylie.
I am
like
currently rereading Robert Reich's book, The Common Good, just because of so many of the current, the political environment and the situation we live in. I like to look at the history and feel good about like where we were and that we could possibly get back to looking out for the common good. And then my favorite actually thing to read lately is Heather Cox Richardson's Facebook posts. She's been writing letters to the American people. So I follow her on Facebook, and every day she kind of summarizes, she's a political historian, what is going on, and then uses her historical knowledge to kind of frame it. And so those are my current readings right now, and hoping to hold on till November 3rd.
Good luck with that. That's good. Okay, Alphonse.
Well, currently I'm reading a book that is a combination of history of civil rights workers in New Orleans. It's called Righteous Lives. And so the types of books that I typically read will be more nonfiction, educational works. this is fits sort of in that category, but it also is serving me as a way of filling in some blanks in for my memoir, which is an interesting piece. Things that I couldn't know because I was of a certain age and was not nearly as worldly and so forth. And this is where the book, this particular book, otherwise, I'm oftentimes reading books that are going to be useful in the classroom or in some way edifying for the general public.
Excellent. Ryan, what are you engulfed in, or what kind of books do you enjoy most?
Fiction is my big thing. Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, I'm pretty big on them. I also like Hunter S. Thompson, who kind of does a little bit of fiction and nonfiction. Lately, I've been reading some of our festival authors, and also I've been getting into Thomas Pynchon lately. Does a lot of like satirical stuff that's really funny and really in depth. So yeah, I guess fiction is my main interest. I mean, I like a little bit of everything, but that's what I'm most interested in.
Why?
Just the language and the storytelling and the immersion, you know, in the story, escapism and empathy and all those good things that come from reading novels, and also learning while you're immersed in a story, you know, learning different things about different people and these characters that people create. So, you know.
Interesting. Well, now we turn to, I would say, the target of this discussion, and that is, how do books impact, or could they impact our society? We can clearly see over time that the dissemination of information has played a big part in how our lives develop. I once went to a lecture by Buckminster Fuller, and it was at that time I was in radio, and it was the National Association of Radio Broadcasters, and he was making the point that he thought that it was up to the broadcast industry to educate people, because he felt like historically that had not been the role of schools, to actually educate people, and people needed educating. So it's going to be it becomes our responsibility as broadcasters to bring people not only news they can use, but frame it in a way that it's digestible, to help people understand the world they were in, and to help them to be able to make better decisions. One of the things he pointed out was that even though we think of writing as a way to disseminate information, that originally it was more about hiding information than it was disseminating information. In other words, you had this information, you wanted to transmit it to someone else, but you didn't want to transmit it to everyone. You know, and originally, like the original religious scripts, for example, in Asia, they were only available to people who were, let's say, chosen. And then, even if you saw it, you might think it was just scratches on bone or something, but it wouldn't occur to you that there was valuable data being transmitted on those. Okay. And he said, fast forward up until Gutenberg, people really weren't really interested in everybody reading. In fact, that was hello? Oh. He was saying that, okay, look, the church wasn't really happy that Gutenberg was printing all these Bibles, because before that, there was only the priests who had the Bibles, and they could say whatever they wanted to say it said, and nobody else had any Bibles, to contradict that. Well, then come along Gutenberg, and it made Martin Luther possible in a way, because now other people could say, well, I don't know if God meant that, or that's not exactly. And then when you look at the history of how the Bible developed as an influential book, you can see that there are lots of iterations of that. But the bottom line here is, like, it wasn't always that everybody had access to information. It was hidden. So clearly somebody understood that if people have information, they may actually start to think. And if they start to think, they may not think what we want them to think. And for some people, that meant chaos, because it means like somebody has an idea different than mine. So how could that be good? How can any good come of that? So clearly, we have the potential to change the world through books. I'd like to hear your ideas on some of the ways. Let's explore that a bit. What are some of the ways that books, whatever kind they are, could change for the better or for the worse the world that, if not us, the children after us, hopefully there'll be children after us, experience the world. What do you think the potential is there? What kinds of things could happen?
I think that that books and all these forms, and I want to even add social media as a kind of micro is a popular prefix these days. So micro books, right, where we have a dissemination of ideas, and to that extent, they're all neutral, right? It's a vehicle for transmitting ideas and information, and so they can transmit good ideas or bad ideas, depending on whatever your point of view is. I'm also really impressed now, though, with the capacity of the many different forms of books that we have access to actually creating ourselves, right? We are all publishers now in a way that we never were before. And our capacity to influence the debate and to really exert our own muscular influence into the culture. I'm really, like, one of the most powerful ideas I've come across recently is that I am culture, right? Whatever I do every day, how I see the world, what I say, how I behave is creating culture. So I have my microculture and I'm influencing the world in a bigger way, really giving credence to the idea that the butterfly in China causes the hurricane, right? The butterfly effect. We have such capacity to do that. And I marvel thinking sometimes that, wow, I could make a post on Facebook that could impact 1 billion people potentially, setting aside whatever algorithmic restrictions the owners of Facebook have created. So I think the capacity for books to make cultural change and to also create a sense of legacy for us as individuals is really magnificent.
Excellent. I really appreciate that point of view. And I would add that, even though we talk about like, social or political or even, personal change, we shouldn't leave out how-to books, because they have made a huge impact. They have made a huge impact on people's everyday lives, because what used to be restricted to a few artisans, which most people had no, let's say, access to, let alone being able to afford, now people do things which people had to have like high levels of skill to do before, and they can go down to the library, pick up a book, and maybe they're not going to be as good as that person who spent their whole life learning it, but it's good enough for them. It's, they may not have the best window, but they have a window, So, Barb. Oh.
I have my mic open, so I'm
Okay, go ahead.
Say what I'm going to say. Alphonse, or Eduardo, you said so eloquently what I was trying to formulate on a closer level, just, my community, my influence. And I think Mr. Diggs one time told me, he's always trying to teach me how to be a grown-up, to not underestimate my own influence, or that wasn't the word, I think. But anyway, it really did set me to thinking, yes, I do have a sphere of influence, and by reading and educating myself, and then being more what I want to see in the world, I think that is affecting people who see me every day on Facebook and people I do encounter in person when it's possible to do so. So that's my contribution to that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to just jump on there. There's a sense sometimes that we don't matter, right? We can very easily trivialize our own existence and capacity. And I think these mediums give us more, can amplify that. I think that's one of the greatest tragedies that we have today, is we have so many people, I think, that don't think they matter.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And even, especially when you have people who think that they matter too much, that then you need the balance of everybody saying, well, hey, look, I don't have everything, but I have something. I have something to say, and I have some input. And no, I don't have to be right all the time. I can, just like everyone else is in transition of learning new things, and you put something out there, somebody challenges what you say, and you say, I didn't think about that. You're now a better person, and everyone around you is a better person. So that having the opportunity for everybody to be in the mix, I just think that's like such a wonderful thing, Barb, did you get your microphone, or did your camera go out too? You're in there. There you go.
Yeah. I found this discussion really quite interesting, especially the melding of the more traditional paper books and the new technology. And Lawrence, I sort of have to disagree with you. I think that people are migrating to the new technology. I know personally, I've run out of room to store books. And as I'm downsizing, I don't have room in my physical space to keep books around. And I enjoy being around books, but it becomes quite impractical. And it's really nice to know that the books that I've enjoyed are in the cloud, and I can download them anytime I want, even at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I found this discussion quite interesting. Again, I think we're all kind of on that precipice between paper books, which we all love, and finding ways to adopt and interact with the new technology. That's what I have to say.
Okay. Well, just to clarify, I mostly use electronic books. Okay, that's my world. For many of the reasons that people have stated, I can double task, multitask. I'm dyslexic, so I actually have been getting books, even textbooks, for years because I'm dyslexic. And so reading is a big deal for, like sitting down to read a book, that's a big thing. So I'm all for it. It's just that the publishing industry tells me that we thought it was going that way, but no, we are seeing now that it's going back. People are buying most of our sales are actually now in paper. I don't know, maybe they're just charging more and they're looking at the dollars. So, but at any rate, that's why I said that. Okay. Thea, what are you thinking about how books can impact our world?
Well, I want to go back to when you talked about how-to books.
Mm.
So as I've been sitting here and I've been coming to quite a few of these, and there's always new people every week. And so I'm not going to lie, I Google all of you. And, while I'm sitting here Googling, I found out that Eduardo works with to prevent barriers to invention. And as a kid, I always wanted to invent something. And as an adult, I have an even stronger urge to invent something. And I keep this little list of my $1 million ideas that I don't know how to make happen. You know, they probably aren't $1 million ideas. They're probably $10,000 ideas, but I wish I had some book that could help me understand, you know, if you want to invent something and it's made out of glass, what do you do? Or if you want to invent something, but you aren't an electrician, what do you do? I want something that would have empowered the child that I was and the child that I still am to learn how to do those kind of things. I think that's a good way to change the world with a book.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would agree that yeah, certainly does change not only access to the technology, but what I found is like it brings me into contact with people that I would not have stopped to talk to before, or would not have stopped to talk to me. I also find that those kind of books give me access to young people who are struggling to figure out what it is that they want to be, you know?
Yes.
Because I go through and I'm always like saying, well, what's under the hood, you know? And how do all of these things fit together? So it positions me to have interesting conversations with young people who are like just really, and also inmates, you know, in the prison. It's like, well, they don't know that there are all these things to be. They just think it's like, you know, either you're like a preacher, a dope dealer, or a pimp, you know, that's sort of the choices that you have. And you say, no, there's like this other thing that feels like as good as being a pimp, but you make more money and the cops don't take your money, you know? So, you know, you have new opportunities. So the technology books are more than just transmitting the technology. Alphonse.
I figured I was about to come up. I'm in two spaces, so let me do the disclaimer first. I would like books in the future to be of great importance. That's the disclaimer. I would like. However, when I interact and see what's happening with 20-somethings and 30-somethings, and they tell me, or at least the literature tells me, that they don't have the attention span to stick with anything that requires deliberate time. It makes me wonder if the book is going to have a future in upcoming generations. I just have to, I'm still trying to reconcile. I mean, I love the idea, Lawrence, when you put that fact out there, the factoid out there, of book existing on shelves for 200 years. Books that are worthy of people's time. I like that idea, but again, paying attention to the way the attention span is working for 30-some things younger, is saying, I don't know if the book is going to survive in the same way in the future.
I concur with your concern. I would say that that other things are happening too. And one of those things is that, well, we're getting more data. So one of the reasons people have shorter attention span is because there's so many things to grab your attention. And then the brain just starts trying to adapt to all the things that you have to know, all the things you have to remember, and all the things that you have to struggle to get the information from. And I think that if books, in the future, I would hope that one of the solutions to that is that people write more efficiently. I remember when my first attempt to write a actual full book was the book on vinegar, okay? And that was a concern of the potential publishers at that time too, is that, well, you have too much information. Can't you write something more like a pamphlet? And I was thinking, well, the whole point of me writing the book is because there's no book in the English language right now on vinegar that's in print. And so if I don't write that book, the people will ask me, would I write the book? Because, you know, I had asked so many questions, people are now asking me questions. I said, well, you know, that would be a cop-out, you know, not to put all that information in there. That said, being a dyslexic, I recognize that this book needs to be more efficient. Because for me, if I pick up a book, I read mostly nonfiction books. If I pick up a book and it doesn't have an index in it, I don't read it. And the reason is I'm not going to read the whole book. I'm only in it to know what I want to know. I'm not there to curl up by the fire and read 500 pages. Doesn't do anything for me. I would rather be sitting in the forest breathing in 500 pounds of oxygen. You know, that's more interesting to me. So I think that the solution is more efficient writing. Get to the point. Tell the story.
Can I jump in on that for a second? Sure. I really, I think that I agree with Alphonse, his point. I think that what's happening is that we're raising the bar on what a book needs to be, right? You're carrying around your phone and you have access to, we'll say 1,000 professional entertainers at an instant notice, right? So if you're a mere amateur and you're competing against that, right? Even if you're having at a dinner table, right? And you're having a family dinner and everyone's got a phone they have access to. If someone's going to tell a story, they're competing against all these other professionals that are in the room that are invisible, right? And so the competition for commanding someone's attention has been raised significantly. And so I think this is why why conversation is being challenged. Also why books are being, right? If the book is boring, I want to use the word compelling, Lawrence. Efficiency isn't it. Yeah. It's got to be compelling, right? And what makes it compelling is like, hey, it's something I want to know in there and I can get to it quickly. If I got to cut through a bunch of stuff to get it, it's not going to be compelling to me and I'm going to put it down. YouTube, I think, is compelling, right? I've discovered recently you can hear recordings of former slaves on YouTube. I've been listening to lots of Martin Luther King interviews and speeches and things, and these are compelling, but a lot of people you're going to listen to elsewhere not nearly as compelling. So we have so many choices to find truly compelling content, and I think it raises the bar for everyone that's that has a message they're putting out to really like bring it from the heart.
Thank you. Kylie.
I agree probably that books in the future will not be as important, the physical book itself. And like I said earlier, I have a 4th grader and a 7th grader, and they do not use textbooks. They go to school and it is all electronic files focused on what they need to know. Classroom books. For reading, they might have a physical book that they have checked out from the library, but anything that is like a class assignment is uploaded electronically. And the thing is, and the teachers have already recognized it, is that it has to hone in on exactly what the topic is. It has to be efficient, and it has to be somewhat meaningful. So instead of, I think, doing a whole book, they do, the relevant paragraphs, relevant, chapters or things, but I really do have concerns that if our K through 12 schools aren't utilizing physical books, that I don't know what influence there's going to be, because, you know, those first few years you can read all the books, you know, in the world to your kids that are physical books. But if they enter the education system and books aren't valued as, you know, a hard copy, as something tangible, as something physical, I don't know how many adults we're going to see with a book in their hands. And it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be the YouTube. It's going to be short Facebook posts. It's going to be whatever platforms available. And I really have concerns about that, I guess, because I love a book in my hands and I love, you know, flipping through, but I really don't think that a hard copy is going to hardly be a thing when these, you know, young generations grow up.
Very interesting insight. Thank you for that. Lynn, you just joined us, but hop on in.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Oh, I'm still trying to recuperate from that debate I watched the other day.
I thought you were going to say from the disco last night, but yeah, that's a little harder debate.
I was just listening to everybody, and I have to agree with the last speaker on the book situation. Myself, I'm not a reader. I'm a storyteller, and I'm a listener. That's how I'm a public speaker. I mean, that's how we do it, where when I go home, kids want to know, tell me a story. That's most thing I can do is sit down and tell a child a story. And so to me, even though I was raised in a well-educated family in Watertown, my dad was a history professor, my mom was a English lit major and all that. Books are all over the house. And when I watch the people on Zoom, it seems like they got to have a bunch of books behind them to look intelligent. It's like, I disagree with that. You can be standing outside and be intelligent. But I find it interesting that people, when they are on Zoom, they want a bunch of books behind them to give the image of intelligence. Other than that, yeah, you guys are having a great discussion. Sorry I joined you late, but I'll just be honest. I contacted Governor Noem, Thune, Rounds, Johnson. I'm really upset with President Trump's not denouncing white supremacy, and I'm upset that our leadership doesn't do the same thing. So I just did an interview with Steve Groves of the AP Wire, and I want some answers because we got Native American Day coming up next week, and I just said in a nice, kind way that if you don't confront Trump, I'm going to confront you because you work for me. I want to know exactly what you think. And other than that, that's where I'm at. Hope everybody's having a great day.
All right. Thank you for that contribution. Betty,
Yeah, you're welcome.
did you? Oh, okay. I thought you were trying to say something. Okay. Well, we're getting coming up on our golden hour here, and it's been a very interesting discussion. I hope it stimulated some new kind of information or new ways to think of things. I just kind of like to leave you guys with a few observations about books. We've talked about how we have the hard copies, you know, we have various forms of electronic and audio books and those kind of things. And we talked about even like the book being, you know, like the physical book having some longevity. And of course, the clay tablet having probably the most potential for longevity, since as far as I know, there's no bacteria that eats fired clay, you know. But there's another thing about the new technologies that is worthwhile considering. And that is that we know from looking at history books that a lot of the history was written down that really wasn't the real story. That was his story, but it wasn't everybody's story. And now we're correcting some of those stories. And so that introduces the concept of data obsolescence, that the data that we had, and it's not just historical data. I suppose everything is history in some way, but it's not just the, you know, who, what, when, why, and where, but even what data is relevant becomes obsolete at the drop of a hat. And if we say, okay, yeah, well, now that we know it's a new thing, we should correct that, and that makes sense, is to correct it. But it also opens up the possibility that people can change things to it was right, and now they're changing it to it's wrong, you know? So I bring that up to say that while we can recognize the importance of getting data in order to think better, I guess that's one of the reasons. That's the reason I read books. It's also it's also important to recognize that there's such a thing as garbage in, garbage out, you know, as we say in the computer industry. And so we can't stop thinking just because we read something. And that was kind of the way it was when I was growing up. If it was in a book, by virtue of it being in a book, we took it as true. Well, now we know that, well, no, all that stuff ain't true. You know, all of those perspectives, though they may be valuable, they are not the only perspectives. Other people had other experiences, some of whom, all of whom could be quite honest in their observation, but different. All of those things could in some sense be correct, but absent more of the story, the part that we know has less value. You know, so it's important that not only do we read one side, or do we explore and think that whatever we read or whatever we experienced in that book is the thing, but always be challenging. You know, ABC, always be challenging the, you know, whatever we read. Is this true? What is this person trying to say? You know, are there other perspectives? Is, like, if I read a book on a how-to, is there another way? You know, I'm exploring glass right now, you know, and things of how glass, you know, what are the properties of glass right now? All different kinds of ways that people look at glass, and they're, you know, so if that could be, if it's something like glass can be explored in all those different ways, certainly something as soft as interpersonal relationships could also have many different ways of looking at things. So I say, read the books, but think about the books too. And then go out and use the information. You know, what's the point of knowing something if you're not going to act on it? If it's not going to be incorporated into your life, at least in some sense of what is the perspective, and how can I see them? How does this book make me a different person? How does this information inform me as to who I could be, and inform me about who others can be? Thank you and good night. Okay, okay. We'll be back next week, same station, same time. And next week, we're going to have a very interesting discussion. We'll have Mike Knudsen and Paula Jensen. And they are a couple of people who are doing economic development in the state. They have invited some of their co-conspirators, economic development to co-conspirators. And we're going to talk about how economic development can inform how we interact with each other, and how we interact with each other can inform economic development. I think that would be a very interesting conversation. So we'll see you next week, same time, same station.